And the really crucial part, veto power in the UN Security Council.
Exactly. It's like scoring this huge majority in the first round of a world championship, diplomatically speaking.
Right. And we have sources detailing this massive support India apparently secured in the UN General Assembly, the UNGA. So our mission here is to figure out what that overwhelming support really means and maybe why it's triggered such, well, fierce, almost dramatic reactions from the few countries still pushing back.
And the number that really jumps out defining this whole deep dive is 146. The material we're looking at claims over 146 countries backed India's resolution, passing a bill for permanent status and veto power right there in the UNGA.
I mean, when 146 nations out of 193 stand with you, that's undeniable momentum. The diplomatic ground has definitely shifted.
Massive leverage, you'd think. But hold on. Before we get carried away with the 146, we need to nail down the stakes for you, the listener. What exactly is this veto power? And why is this fight happening in, like, two different arenas?
Good point. Veto power sounds simple, ultimate control, but let's break down the mechanics.
Yeah, walk us through it.
Okay, so veto power is the ability for a permanent member of the Security Council, which is the real engine room, responsible for peace and security, the ability to vote against any significant resolution. And that vote kills it instantly.
Instantly.
Instantly. Doesn't matter how much support it has otherwise. Our sources call it the biggest right and power in world politics because, well, it lets a permanent member stall or just completely block collective global action if they choose.
Wow, that is immense power. So one nation can basically stop the entire world on a critical security issue. Or trade.
Precisely. And right now, that power belongs only to the 5 permanent members, the P5, the US, Russia, Britain, France, and China.
Okay, so that explains the power. What about the 2 rooms you mentioned, the UNGA vote versus something else?
Right. So the vote in the UNGA, where India apparently got those 146 votes, is hugely influential. It shows this overwhelming global consensus, gives moral authority. But, and this is the key thing, it's not legally binding.
Okay.
The final decisive stage happens in a closed-room vote within the Security Council itself. To actually get the veto power, India needs every single one of the current P5 members to approve it, unanimously. No vetoes against their membership.
Got it. So the 146 votes basically say the world wants India in the club, but the 5 existing members still hold the keys to the door. Which brings us perfectly to our first segment, the changing alignments. Because the sources we have suggest that maybe the toughest hurdle getting the P5 on board might already be cleared, or at least neutralized somehow.
Yeah, what's really fascinating here is this alleged unified front among the P5. And the support wasn't just, passive agreement. It was apparently active endorsement from all over Europe, Australia, South America, Japan, and significantly the entire African bloc, all 53 countries.
Lucky, broad support.
Yeah.
But the real drama is within those existing 5, right?
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really interesting according to the sources. China. China has, historically been the biggest, most vocal opponent to India getting a permanent seat, often using its veto threat to protect its own interests, right?
Absolutely. A fierce roadblock. Yet the material reports that this time China stood in support.
Whoa, okay.
That's arguably the biggest geopolitical pivot mentioned in these sources. And China's supposed rationale was incredibly symbolic. They allegedly said India is the voice of Asia and that the UN is, quote, incomplete without India.
Incomplete without India.
What's wrong with that?
That's huge. It's not just stepping aside, it's almost an endorsement, especially given their alliance with Pakistan.
It's a dramatic shift in rhetoric, no question.
So why now? What's the calculation? Is Beijing genuinely accepting India's rise, or is this more, strategic necessity?
Well, the sources seem to lean heavily towards necessity. I mean, China probably recognizes that actively opposing a resolution backed by 146 countries, that just costs too much diplomatic capital, especially with other international frictions they're managing.
So supporting India, even if maybe reluctantly, lets them look supportive of multilateralism, maybe claim some regional leadership points.
Plausibly, yes. It's a complex calculation.
Okay, then there's the United States. The sources note the U.S. has shifted to support, recognizing India's growing power and global support. I find that interesting, too, especially thinking about recent trade friction, the tariff wars mentioned.
Yeah, and that past friction is actually key here. The sources do recall those attempts at trade pressure, but the data seems to suggest America's strategic thinking has evolved. The U.S. increasingly sees India as a vital strategic partner, especially as a democratic counterweight in Asia. So the sources imply the U.S. calculus shifted. It's no longer just about trade competition. It's about India as a critical geopolitical ally. They can't afford not to support them on this stage.
Okay, so if we take these sources at face value, the picture is pretty staggering. Russia, a longtime ally, check. France and Britain, strong supporters, check. And now China and the U.S., the two big historical holdouts or antagonists, are apparently aligned.
That's the claim. The sources conclude that among the P5, no countries left opposing India's permanent status.
Wow. If true, that removes the biggest institutional roadblock before that final closed-room vote you mentioned.
It signals a major shift. The P5 agreeing, even reportedly, suggests this isn't just about regional squabbles anymore. It's a recognition of India as, well, an indispensable global power.
So if the world's biggest powers have apparently conceded, who's still resisting? And why so fiercely? That takes us to segment 2, the opposition and the fallout, bringing that diplomatic friction to life.
Right. The sources specifically named Turkey and Saudi Arabia as the main critics, but they also describe their opposition as ultimately weak against that huge 146-country consensus. And crucially, their dissent seems less about the UN structure itself and more rooted in deep regional geopolitical rivalries.
And the description of Turkey's reaction is, well, dramatic. The representative was allegedly so angry he actually tore up a copy of the bill, thumping the table.
Yeah, that's the report. It's not just a quiet no vote. It's portrayed as this international outburst against the global tide.
Why such anger?
That kind of visceral response, if it happened like that, really underscores the strategic challenge India's growing influence poses to Turkey's own regional ambitions. The sources even point to a specific incident that apparently ratcheted up tensions. Turkey allegedly tried to threaten an Indian warship, the INS Trickhand.
Really?
Yes, sort of a display of strength. But India apparently called them out at the UN, used international rules, and it backfired. Turkey ended up looking aggressive, even getting ridiculed globally, according to these reports.
So the anger at the UN vote wasn't just about the vote itself. It was maybe the culmination of feeling diplomatically cornered.
Exactly. The source material really paints a picture of complex rivalries. Turkey's growing isolation seems directly linked to India building stronger ties with Greece, Cyprus, and Israel. Those alliances boost India's influence in the Mediterranean and West Asia, which directly challenges Turkey's regional goals.
Okay, that makes sense. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia, they'd also been making some anti-India noise recently, but the sources say they were basically forced into silence by the sheer weight of the 146 votes.
That's the narrative. And for Saudi Arabia, the frustration seems tied directly to something huge. India's energy and investment diplomacy. This is a major game changer.
How so?
India has been incredibly savvy navigating global energy markets. They've signed these long-term strategic deals with the UAE and Qatar. And crucially, they've been leveraging their relationship with Russia to buy cheaper oil, significantly undercutting traditional suppliers.
So India essentially weaponized energy deals against geopolitical rivals, undercutting Saudi oil dominance and market share.
Precisely. India's energy strategy reportedly hit Saudi interests quite hard. And now, India seems to be leveraging that economic clout for diplomatic power. The sources even give a powerful example. A recent bill passed against Saudi Arabia, supported by 128 countries.
A bill against Saudi Arabia, supported by 128 nations.
Yeah, aimed at imposing restrictions, potentially